All right, greetings from the Dark Continent, Conscious Caracal here, or Adams van Sail, here to shine a light on the goings-on down south, but also some of our friends up north on the European side of things. Tonight, joining me is András Kiss. He is the president of the South African Hungary Friendship Association, and he's going to be telling us a bit more about what his organization does, what their goals are, and how the Hungarian culture connects to the Afrikaner culture. And as you know, this is the second episode of the Friends of the Afrikaner series on my channel. And in this series, I talk to, as the name implies, friends of the Afrikaner, people out there in the world that are watching South Africa, seeing what's going on here, and who are extending a hand of friendship, a hand of cooperation. And we not only talk about the forms of cooperation or potential for friendship that there exists there, but also in this series we cover that culture of my guest that I'm speaking to. So in the previous episode, we talked to a friend of the Afrikaners in Slovakia, and today we are talking to a friend of the Afrikaners in Hungary. And in Afrikaans, you'd say Hongarije. And András, thank you very much for your time and welcome on the show. I'm looking forward to share with my audience what your organization does and a bit of your culture as well.
Thanks, Ernst. It's good to be on your show. I've followed a couple of your podcasts and video clips, and it's good to be live on the radio. And good evening to your listeners from a very hot Hungary. It's been in the mid-30s today, and it's a really stunning day over here. Nice to have a good swim. But yeah, we can dive right in.
All right. And I think the best place to start is actually the organization that you represent. So the organization's official name is the Hungarian Southern African Friendship Association. You just give us the basic history of where did this organization start and what was the sentiment behind starting an organization like this?
Basically, having grown up in South Africa myself, but my parents were Hungarian, so I grew up in a Hungarian home, but in the Cape, in South Africa. Got to learn English and Afrikaans there, and I'm a proud oud Māori. A couple of years ago, when I decided to leave South Africa with my family to Hungary, I realized that there was a lot of friends who I was going to be leaving behind, but at the same time wanted to still keep contact, and realizing that things are not what they should be in South Africa, especially after 1994, with the promises of a great democracy and a great society, and it just simply didn't pan out like that. And I just felt that it's my duty to keep the contact with especially my Afrikaner friends, and to see what we could do to try to help them, the Afrikaner community, and see where we could make a difference in perhaps from our side here in Central Europe, helping to the Afrikaner to help with this South African situation. And so we decided to put this association together. So if I look at the mission statement, the mission was to promote general prosperity, cultural cooperation, scientific development, and economic and commercial growth in South Africa, the southern region of Africa, and Hungary, and the Central European region. And it sounds a little bit broad, but if you look at the aim, it's to pursue a mutually beneficial working relationship between Hungarians and the cultural communities like the Afrikaner in South Africa, create an awareness of each other's region, history, unique cultural heritage, also pursue socio-economic development relations, community development outreach programs and cooperation, education, skills development, and technological innovation programs, promotion of trade, business ties, investment initiatives between Hungarians and the Afrikaner communities in South Africa. etc. And then there's a whole bunch of activities related to this. It is available on our website. So you're welcome to take a look at it. I don't know if you'd like me to give the website address now.
That's not necessary. The website is in the description of
Okay.
this video. So people, even if they're too lazy to type it in, they can just a click away. It's in the description. It's quite easy to find. But maybe if there's anyone just listening that are not on YouTube currently, maybe you should give the website if they are listening on another platform.
Yeah. Adding to that, we did an outreach in 2019 and had the first initial conversations with SAI and then with the Solidarity Movement, Solidarity AfriForum, and invited them to come, some representatives to come and visit us here in Hungary. And in the middle of COVID, a core group arrived in June 2021, and I still remember we had a hell of a time trying to get the group out through with the COVID restrictions at the airport, but we managed to get everything done. And I think for those of the group, in fact, I don't think anybody in the group was ever in Hungary before, and I think the feedback was they expected to see something like an apocalyptic ex-Soviet state, and everybody speaking Russian, and
with grey buildings everywhere.
Yeah, and we are not a Slavic nation either. We are an island in the middle of Central Europe, surrounded by a sea of Slavic nations and of course Germanic nations as well. But anyway, they came through. We took them to Parliament, introduced them to various public and private sector role players. And I think for a first-time visit, I think it was quite an eye-opener for them. We even had the groups represented were from AfriForum, SAI, and of course we even had Sarkelicha here as well. And they went back, gave their feedback, and in this process we decided to start this Hungarian Southern African Friendship Association. I don't know of any other like that. There's plenty of friendship associations, but not this one specific to South Africa, and not this one specific to the Hungarians and the Afrikaner community. Since then, the feedback that we've received is that we have been one of the most active associations as Friends of the Afrikaner, and there's a lot of milestones. And I must just let you know that our website is in progress to be updated, but you'll follow a little bit of history of the different meetings that took place. We obviously also sent a delegation through to South Africa to go and meet with the Solidarity Movement and to get a better understanding what the Solidarity Movement is about, the activities, and how we can cooperate. And since then, we've had successes such as an MOU that's been signed between one of the biggest agricultural universities in Europe and academia. As you know, academia, big private institution within the Solidarity Movement, and they don't have a agricultural faculty, and the University of Mate in Hungary is going to help them establish such a faculty. And so this is in progress. And then, of course, we've had interesting projects such as the translation of Ansrutz's book into Hungarian, Kill the Boer. And there's been a phenomenal response here in Hungary, and there's a continuous process of bringing it to the attention of the Hungarian society, the problems faced by the Afrikaner community, especially the farming community, and the farm murders. And there's been a number of media articles that have appeared, also a couple of YouTube clips as well. Unfortunately, most of them will be in Hungarian, so it won't be possible for somebody to read it unless they are Hungarian. but we will try from our side to get some information out there into English where possible.
And I wanted to put your website here on the screen. You'll see there, if you're listening, it's www.hsafs.com. And as András said, it is a work in progress, but there's already a lot of information there specifically on what his organization is doing. And I see a lot of people are trickling in here. There's a question from the audience. András, Sideliner Opinions asks, do most Hungarians speak or understand English?
No, but I think that's been a question that's asked quite often by South Africans who are here. What we do find is probably in the last 20 years, there's been a lot more of a swing by the younger generation to learn English as a second language. So often the kids at school, they learn more than one foreign language, and it's quite popular to learn English. So for anybody coming to Hungary, especially Budapest or some of the biggest cities, you can definitely get by with English. But if you're planning to stay, then like any place, to integrate, it's best to learn the language.
And I see Hendo is saying you are on Facebook as well, so people can find you there too.
Yes.
You mentioned that there have been not only visits of delegations from South Africa to Hungary through your initiatives of your organization, but you've also visited South Africa. What were some of the impressions among your group of Hungarians when they visited and saw things like the Voortrekker Monument? I know there's some nice pictures there on your website, and some other cultural experiences that you had. What were some of the impressions?
I'd like to say that they were blown away. Quite frankly, I didn't expect to see that amount of development in South Africa, but from a cultural perspective. Hungarians know who the Boers are, but that kind of cultural heritage they weren't really exposed to. And I think it's that we can also say is one of our aims that we'd like to do is to bridge the gap between the Afrikaner community and Hungarians here in Hungary, to make them more aware of the Afrikaners culture, their language, their history, contributions to universal culture, and also the challenges that are faced by the Afrikaner, and also introduce that aspect to the Afrikaner community to say, yes, there's a community in Europe that has some very similar values. There's lots of common footing and lots of shared cultural values, and that's well worth, what's the word I can use here?
Promoting.
Promote it and get more of awareness out there. That can lead to other things such as getting things like cultural exchange programs moving. These are things that we can't do on our own, and we need as much help as possible. But we are not just a group of individuals. We also rely on public and private sector to also make a contribution and to put a shoulder to the wheel.
Here's another comment from Hein Velman. He says, we collaborate daily with Hungarian team members on multinational projects. Kiss seems to be a familiar surname. My personal experience, Hungarians have a great work ethics and are very polite.
Yes, you're definitely correct there. Yeah, with my surname, you could definitely not work in incognito. So being in school in South Africa and of course going to Marty's, I was never called Meneer Kiss because they didn't know how to pronounce it, so they end up calling me Meneer Soon. But yeah, it's a very common surname. They say if you threw a rock or stone into a group of Hungarians, you're most likely to hit somebody with my surname.
And here's a question from Feinor who asks, or first he says, respect for your organization. And then he says, isn't Hungarian one of the hardest languages in the world?
Yeah, I think we Hungarians like to pride ourselves on just how challenging it is to learn Hungarian. But I think, like the Afrikaner, we pride ourselves that it's a really beautiful, amazing language. If you
Doesn't sound like anything, you can't really compare it to any other language.
No, I was just telling actually one of your group members that actually my daughter had been doing some research on J.R.R. Tolkien, and he apparently had done some research in the Hungarian language to try to integrate that in his idea of what the Elvish language would sound like. So I don't know if that adds weight to it, but yeah, it's a difficult language, but it's not impossible to learn if you immerse yourself into it. You learn it quicker. But I sent you that picture of the European languages, how long it takes to learn each one, and where it came to Finland and Hungary. It just said good luck. And then
Yeah,
that's
well,
a joke.
my solidariteit movement or solidarity movement colleague Ernst Roots is attempting to learn your beautiful language. So we'll see how far he gets. I just realized when I was in Budapest earlier this year, I can't even start to read some of the signs. I mean, I can't even find the root of many of the words. But yes, all major respect to anyone that does attempt it. There's another comment here from Hendo who says, I visited Hungary twice, lived and worked with Magyarok Hungarians in the UK. And he says the closest is the Finnish language.
Yeah, I think people can actually be lucky that we're not using our original alphabet, because that was also written, for example, from right to left. And it looks completely different to the Latin alphabet. Actually, our first Christian king who decided to initiate improved diplomatic ties with Western Europe, he said that we need to accept the Latin-based alphabet to try to make communication better. But yeah, so that's quite an interesting thing. You'll also find some little bit of info about our original alphabet. And what's interesting is you find some of those letters on as part of ancient Mesopotamian alphabet. So that's quite interesting.
But on that note, the Afrikaner culture is very young, really incredibly young compared to many European cultures. But if you trace back the Hungarian culture's history, how old is the history of Hungary? Just to put things in perspective.
That would be, I think different Hungarians would have a different answer for you. Some people say, oh, our history is about 1,000 years old, but actually it's far older than that. If we look at back in time, there's an institute that's actually been set up by our government. I mean, they've been doing amazing work into where Hungarians actually originate from, who are people, and what they've been able to find is that, for example, we have these various markers and gene markers that stretched out all the way into Asia. And for example, any Korean or Japanese would make far better sense of the grammar in Hungarian than, for example, Western Europeans. So there's some grammatical link that's been linked to these languages. I'm not saying that we are Korean, but for example, our great forefather, Attila the Hun, people through all these various researches that's been taking place, especially over the last 20 to 30 years, they've ascertained that those Huns were actually two different tribes, one to the north, one to the south. They're originally more or less one group, but they were an alliance of different ethnic groups. So, for example, you had amongst those groups, our people were there, and the people that acknowledge that the people who are the remnants of Attila the Hun and the Huns in Europe are are nations such as let's see, in China, Kazakhstan, Mongolia. In fact, there's a museum in Outer Mongolia that's dedicated to our people, as our forefathers. But of course, so that gives you some complexity as to where we came from, how we moved. There's lots of other theories about when there was an ice age that our people moved out from from Europe, went through what is today Iran, Persia, and then eventually ended up into the Asiatic plains, and then started to make this movement or migration towards Europe. So by the time we came into Europe, then we were under the kingship of Attila the Hun, and in fact, Budapest is named after Attila the Hun's brother. So the Buddha part comes from Budapest, is named after his brother. And when so we're talking about 330 AD, by the time he hit Europe, and when he passed away, the last of the remaining tribes, and that was also an alliance of people, were the Magyars, and they remember that the place where they had inhabited was here in the heart of the Carpathian Basin. So they re-entered the Carpathian Basin, and they reckoned that we were about the same number of people as the French people, the French Gauls, and the Germanic people. So about 500,000 people, roughly. And they estimate that we should actually be about 80 million people today as Hungarians, but we are not. And the reason being is that with our alliance that we eventually cemented with the Western Christian Europe, we became the defenders of Christianity on the eastern outskirts. And we took a toll. So, for example, when Genghis Khan's troops arrived in the early 13th century, we took a hammering. We lost 2/3 of our population, but we were also probably the only people that knew how these people fought. There was a similar type of fighting style, and we were able to actually defeat them in the Third War and actually turn them around. Otherwise, Europe would have been decimated. And then later on in the 16th century, 17th century, the battles against the Ottoman Turks. And again, we were the bulwark against, the invasion by the Ottoman Turks, protecting Christian Europe. So, so we put our bodies and our blood on the line, and we are only in the world about 15 million people today.
And you sent me a quote before the show started that is a testament to what you're saying here, the history of Hungary being this gateway country to the rest of Western Europe, or Europe at large. And the quote that you sent me was by Pope Pius II in 1456, and he said, "Hungary is the shield of Christianity and the protector of Western civilization." And this is a testament to what you've just been saying here about constant invasion from the East. And that also probably impacted your culture in regards to it having that strong Eastern influence as well. It's not like a typical Western European culture. There's a very strong Eastern element in your culture as well, and you see it in many regards, from the music to the food to the clothing style. It's everywhere. You are one of those in-between cultures, just as you'd find with, for example, not to such a strong extent, but for the Afrikaners being an in-between culture where you have a lot of influence from Africa as well, and in our culture.
Yeah, I think in that sense it's good to bring in the the situation of the Afrikaner, that you sit in a sea surrounded by different cultures, and you learn to make it work and survive in the environment that you're in. And one way that you can survive is through innovation, also creating friendships, creating communities, building relationships. And I think that that's something that Hungary has been doing, and just like the Afrikaner. And we all know that to survive, and I tell my Hungarian compatriots often, can you imagine arriving in the southern point of Africa and trying to make a living, and then deciding that you don't like the environment that you're in. And we're talking about, when the British, occupied the Cape, and going with ox wagons over mountains into
the unknown, the literal unknown.
Animals, you had to fend for yourself, it's I think most Hungarians, tip their hats to what the Afrikaner has accomplished, it's, I think that Protestant ethic you earn off the sweat of your brow, is well respected.
And if I remember correctly, there were Hungarians that came and fought in the Anglo-Boer War as well. I think, if I remember correctly, it was it's not precisely the number that I remember. It's somewhere in the region of about 20. And I think about 15 fought on the Boer side, and about 5 or 6 fought on the British side, if I remember. Ernst Roots talked about it when we were there in Budapest. Do you remember what the details were there?
Yeah, I think at that stage, a lot of continental Europe was on the side of the Boers. So apart from Hungarians, you had Austrians, Russians, French, lots of European nations sending troops. And these guys were normally some of your top fighting type of commandos, people that were well educated, well versed in the Tritian warfare, or using cannons. Tactics, things like that, and it was I would call it almost a romantic war to go and fight on the side of the Boers against this, this bully, against the British. They weren't exactly flavor of the month at that stage, and and they fought a good fight. And I think even the last, that last Christmas when the Boers in the Second Anglo-Boer War, they had to make a decision. You can go home to your family and afterwards come back after Christmas and continue the fight. A lot of those European contingents were there with the bitter enders to the end. So yes, that's also that's definitely in Hungary. People know about that. But doing a little bit of research myself. Hungarians have actually even been in the working for the Dutch East India Company, and one of the traditional careers for Hungarians was mercenaries. So we, along with some Austrians, were helping the Dutch East India Company when the British attacked the Cape. But Hungarians were involved on the ships with horses, and also, of course, that area of Tokaj in the Cape. There's lots of legends as to how it got its name, but it's possibly most likely that Hungarian winemakers and farmers had helped to cultivate that area of Cape Town.
That's fascinating stuff, András. And there's a question that was asked earlier, and I kept it saved here because I think it's very relevant. So Sideline Opinions asks, which religion is dominant in Hungary, and how religious are Hungarians?
Well, the dominant religion is by far Christianity, for sure. We do have a sizable percentage who are Jewish, and I must tell you that here in Europe, probably arguably one of the safest places for Jewish people, especially now in Europe, is here in Hungary. And Hungary prides itself on its Judaic Christian culture, and very much supports Christian initiatives. For example, Hungary has the only ministerial department called Hungary Helps, that deals with helping Christian communities under threat across the world. And Hungary has repaired something like 3,500 churches in the last, I think, 5-10 years, and a lot of them actually outside of Hungary and even in the Middle East.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to meet with Hungary Helps there in Budapest with another representative from our similar organization, Solidariteit Helpende Hand, Solidarity Helping Hand. And there's hopefully going to be increased cooperation there between two Christian organizations that are looking after those in need. And on that note as well, I think on the note of Christianity, there's another question here from the audience. JC McFarlane asks, I assume Hungarians are very conservative people. Is that is the feeling that he got?
Yeah, we are conservative society, for sure. So you won't get much traction in terms of the work kind of culture, and you just need to take a look at various media articles. Just Google search Hungary and conservative culture, and you'll find all the opposition to that. But I think Hungarians like the booze. We like to swim upstream, especially when we feel that we are correct and justified. And Hungarians are the kind of people that will not give up things like strong family values, with a Christian-based culture. They are unapologetic about it. So when that, and that's why also recently they brought in new legislation to strengthen the fact that schools may not bring in any kind of LGBTQ-related information. And they say that it's the role of the parents to guide the children in terms of sexuality, and so that the state is adamant about. And you just need to look around when you're walking around in Hungary. It's a safe place. People respect other cultures. But Hungary is also saying, respect us. We are a conservative Christian nation. And that's what we are, and that's what we'll always be.
And what I also noticed was a very strong focus on the family and having children, that you can't have this beautiful heritage and there's nobody to inherit it. That was the big impression that I got from just talking to Hungarians and talking to Hungarians that are proud about their heritage and want to leave something behind, but also not just leave something behind, make sure there's someone to leave something behind too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think nothing that the our government does, is short term. They're looking at the future to say we need to make sure that we have a growing population. So they do have a policy that is supportive of families and kids and the education, subsidies for housing. I think the state is actually doing a pretty amazing job in the face of strong opposition compared to the rest of Europe. And Hungary is saying that it is our birthright and it's our right that we have a country and we have our own culture, and we can pass it on to our children. I mean, we actually, what's that famous saying? Something about we borrow this land and this time from our future, grandchildren, and we need to leave something for them as well, something wholesome, something good.
Absolutely. And also I think what makes the Hungarians Hungary a very interesting and relevant case study is also your respect and also your focus on strong borders. It doesn't mean that you attack anyone that is an outsider to Hungarian culture or to Hungary. It just means that you maintain and conserve the entity that is Hungary and the Hungarian people. And I mean, the earlier you touched on your history, that makes complete sense why Hungarians take borders very, very seriously.
Oh, that's for sure. I mean, we know that through history that unless you're prepared to fight for it, there's been many civilizations that just simply disappeared or were assimilated into something completely different. Languages disappeared, cultures disappeared, and we as Hungarians believe that we have a future here, and the one way to make sure that we do have it is a strong border. And Nobody is going to tell Hungarians, oh, no, just have a open border. Everything's going to be fine and dandy. It's not that. We've had our historical lessons, and we cannot understand why Western Europeans have forgotten their own history. I mean, how many people sacrificed their lives for their culture, to ensure that it still was standing, for the people that are living today. And you need to, stand up for it and say, yeah, but this is mine and I have a right to it. And if you look at it, there's always this criticism, but it's mainly from these woke lefties and liberals out of Western Europe. And take a look, you never see, or hardly ever see, any criticism of Hungary from Turkey. And I mean, we've had the biggest battles, the biggest opposition that the Ottoman Turks ever had when they were trying to invade Europe was us. And they respect us. And in fact, the European nation that they respect the most, and in fact, they say they love the most, is the Hungarians. They have a big respect for us, because Hungarians will say, this is our culture, this is our religion, we're not going to give it to you. This is ours, and we're prepared to fight for it.
I think that's a very strong sentiment. Another sentiment also, I think, that describes your approach, the Hungarian idea of identity, is that I think it's G.K. Chesterton that said, it's not that you're fighting because you hate what's in front of you, you fight because you love what's behind you. And I think that's the sentiment that makes Hungary so strong on its identity and preserving what it has. Another thing that I noticed that stands out, speaking to Hungarians and seeing what your country is like, is that the scars of communism are still there, but you're in a constant dialogue with the past. It's not something that you hide away. It's not something that you don't constantly think about or keep in your memory. You are actually quite adamant that people don't forget the past. They have to remember the treatment or how it was under communism in Hungary, and that you are going to ensure that you never return to that type of extreme ideology ever again.
Yeah, that's for sure. We had some interesting conversations when Solidarity Movement representatives were here and speaking to officials and role players, and they definitely would say to you, when somebody comes with this leftist ideology and this woke culture, we smell communism. And it's not something that Hungarians would ever want to see ever again. And they always say how it's always wrapped and packaged by the left to be something so amazing, and everything's just going to be dandy until you feel it on your own skin. And that's what we Hungarians say as well, is that don't fall for it. It's not a paradise what people make it out to be. It causes so much damage to your society, and that's I can attest to that as well. The effects are here in the former socialist states, not only in Hungary but the Czech Republic, the old Yugoslavia, Romania, etc. And one of the aspects that took a knock was also Christianity, but thank goodness Christianity is making a good, excellent comeback, and we see a great future as a Christian nation here, and fighting the good fight.
If I remember correctly, there's even a line in the Hungarian constitution about never returning to communism, or a resistance to communism.
Absolutely, no. But they're adamant. I mean, if I look at how I got to South Africa, was my parents fled in 1956 because they did not want to sit under Soviet communist oppression, and it's been tough. And if you look at the economies, they are springing back, but you also find that a lot of the states like Hungary and the surrounding former communist countries are a little bit wary of approaches by Western European countries. They don't want to be to be used for the sake of just being another market or a cheap market, whether it's for labor, whether to come and dump their products and things like that. And I must say that the Hungarian government has been doing amazing work in protecting the worker, making sure that they protect the economy as best as they can, getting investments, diversifying the investments as well. So it's not only from within the European Union, but also we have, there's a policy in outreach to the east, for example, and also to the south, which includes Africa. So that's something that we would like to encourage through our different channels as well, to encourage that bilateral economic relationship between Hungary and South Africa, and that we believe strongly that the Afrikaner has a strong entrepreneurial spirit, would be the right people to partner up with and to drive that to the better of everybody in not only South Africa but Southern Africa.
No, absolutely. And then András, also I wanted to know about what the future holds. You've told us a little bit about what your organization has already done to strengthen ties between South Africa and Hungary, specifically between the different cultural communities here, particularly the Afrikaners. What does the future hold? What are some of the things that you'd like to achieve in the future, or that your organization will aim to achieve in the future, looking forward?
I think that's a wish list that can stretch all the way to the sky. I think the things that we are looking at immediately is to make sure that the MOU that's been signed between our large agricultural university, Mate University, and academia, progresses and moves forward. Then, of course, we would like to push for more student bursaries for Afrikaners to come and study in Hungary, where especially they might have battle to get place in South African universities or don't have the money to go study at a South African university. So that's deep in our heart. Also to have some kind of youth exchange. We've been talking about it. One of the things that is definitely coming up, and that is a leadership exchange program. So where I believe that MCC will be involved in that. It's a think tank institute in Hungary, where actually we've had somebody from the Solidarity Movement actually has been doing a research program, taking part in a research program here. And we'd like to expand on that, but we would like to bring the youth leadership from within the Solidarity Movement and to be part of a regular exchange program with youth over here in Hungary through this kind of conservative think tank.
JC McFarlane says we have a group of veterinary students there now. Thanks for looking after them. Heard that the Hungarian government is assisting them. Yeah. And then I see Hendo says that the Hungarian parliament is a beautiful Gothic style building. Yes, it was when I saw it when we were there in Budapest. It is the most beautiful parliament building that I've ever seen. It's really a magnificent building. If you've not seen it after the show, go Google Hungarian Parliament building. And András, if I remember correctly, the Parliament building is not that old. It's only about 120 or so years old. I think it was built in not even 120. I think it was built in 1904, but it looks like it was built hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, no, that building is amazing, and it's a miracle it's still standing. For example, in the Second World War, I think a Soviet bomb fell through the cupola and didn't explode, so it's still standing. And it's still an amazing that Budapest still stands, because there was such damage during the Second World War and in 1956. And in fact, I think a lot of people don't know that Hungary, together with the Germans during the Second World War, it was the longest battle that took place against the Soviets after Stalingrad. And in a way, when I spoke to my parents about it, I think the realization was that I think a lot of Germans only I think fairly recently probably realized that had the Hungarians not made that fight, they would have taken over West Germany as well, and there wouldn't have been a free Germany at all. But that's it's a lot of things that have happened in our past that I think if we could undo and have done differently, I think we have the wisdom of a history to see things as they
The
are.
wisdom of hindsight,
Yeah.
looking in the rear view mirror. I see
Um,
a Hendo says, yes, a very beautiful building, the Hungarian Parliament. Also have a Heroes Square in Budapest. Yes, we also visited the Heroes Square. It was beautiful. Also, again, it shows the Hungarian relationship to your past. You are always honoring the heroes from your past. And I think that's also what stood out to me in Budapest, is that on every street corner there's a statue or some type of monument to someone or something out of the past. And there's museum. It's a city full of museums and history, and you can everywhere you are just reminded about that you are walking in a city that is very, very old, that's centuries old, that you can see the history everywhere in the form of, like I said, statues, monuments, museums. Everywhere the Hungarian people are in constant dialogue with your past.
Absolutely, and I think it's good to reflect on things that have happened in our past, and to see the mistakes that one or things that we should have done differently or made different choices. And I think that is important for our future as well, especially here in Europe. And I think that's probably, if I can express that to the Afrikaner, I think it's also important to hold that true. Nothing that you've done has been a waste of time. You would have learned from that, and whether it was good or bad, you can take that as a lesson for the future and see how you can do things differently. And from that respect, if I look at what the Hungarian government is doing, they really are doing an amazing job. I know there's some of my compatriots who are not conservative, wouldn't agree with that. That's like anything. For example, if I look at just going to do your ID or your driver's license, some locals were complaining that they had to wait, I don't know how many minutes. I said, "What? You're lucky. You don't have to stand in a queue that's a kilometer long, and they can post it to you." For example, here, the postman brings the pension money as cash. Wow. And drops it off at the people.
The South African post office has just been is on the verge of being liquidated.
Unbelievable. And then if you look at the bank, my dear wife asked me to ask the bank manager the question: aren't they scared of being robbed because there's no glass plate or anything, and they handle the money right there, in front of you? And then the guy said, "But who would do such a stupid thing? They'd get caught in a half an hour. That's not an issue." So I think they're a bit spoiled, but it's a great place to live. Beautiful environment. If I can ever encourage anybody to make that trip, it's probably going to be one of your most cost-effective trips you're going to make to Europe. Your safest trip to Europe, for sure. We still have our culture, we still have our food, we still have our music, we still have our language. There's something going on every night. If I look at Budapest, there's festivals on the go. For example, here now in Budapest is the world's biggest pop concert and festival without any incidents, and they have more than 500,000 young people that come and attend it. And it's growing every year. And I
Yeah,
think
and
there's
as I
so
said,
much to do.
there's also a museum around every corner, art gallery almost everywhere. There's just so many cultural experiences you can have there as well.
Yeah. Um, I think that's worthwhile for anybody to just to do a little bit of research as to what are the top 10 things to come. And if you've got limited time, come and look in Budapest, for example. But don't only limit yourself to Budapest, because there's such amazing, beautiful countryside and rural areas to experience. Great wine regions, fantastic food. And as I said, I think for the South Africans who maybe got a limited budget, you will really enjoy yourself at a fraction of the cost of the parts of Europe, without trying to bring down other European neighbors. Everybody's got their beauty and everything and their history, but I can be biased.
So I'm just going to read some comments and then I'm going to ask the last question. So Savannah says, I haven't been to Hungary since 2000. Must be so different these days. And then Jose de Silva says, enjoyed my 2 weeks spent in Budapest. And JC McFarlane just says amazing when he listened to your description of Budapest and Hungary. Savannah also says, I will soon visit and check how much things have changed in the last 23 years. Yeah. And then there was a question here that I wanted to ask, and this is more of a, I'm not going to end on this sentiment, but I think now that we've discussed also the positive side of Hungary, just can you list some of the challenges that Hungarians are also facing? Where are some of the places that, or some of the terrains where Hungary is facing challenges and where things need to be addressed when it comes to threats to the culture or the nation?
I think if I look at the world in general, I think probably the same things that the Afrikaner is also facing. Globalization, trying to minimize the impact or the influence of the family. So if I look at especially this liberal work culture, it's continuous. Even if you ban that kind of propaganda from schools, you're still getting it through some kind of media, through the internet. So that's obviously, it's a continuous threat. I would say, we have a war next door, which is not great, and I'm sure that you will see that our government is continuously hammering on the idea that they should be talking about peace. There's no other way. This war cannot be won. It's a slow, long grind, and they're burning through a generation of young men and people. It's just terrible. And they are saying that it's important that America be one of the role players, sitting around the table with Russia, with Ukraine, probably a couple of other bigger role players, to get those peace negotiations going so that they can bring this terrible tragedy to an end. And it does affect us. Hungary has received about 1 million refugees from the Ukraine, Poland even more. So it has impacted this region, and we also sit with a sizable minority that live across the border. You must remember that Hungary, after the First World War, lost 2/3 of its territory. So we sit with our people across the border in almost every single direction. So we have about 150, maybe 200,000 Hungarians who are affected, and the men are also being drafted and taken to the front line. So it affects us as well as a nation. They are our people as well. Other things that affect us, global economy. I think we are not immune to the shocks of it, no matter where you are in the world. But I think the way that Hungary handles it is to try to diversify its economy. So, for example, it was funny for me that Hungary was being lambasted for how much trade it's doing with China and things like that. And in the meantime, it was far less than, for example, the French or the Germans were trading with the Chinese. And they're an important global role player economically. But then there's a lot of others. With South Korean, Japanese investments are here, for example, other than Germany is a big investor here as well. But we have from America, Canada, UK, and I must tell you that there's a lot of expats who come and work in Hungary, and there's not one that I've had a conversation with that has said that they don't enjoy working here in Hungary, or they enjoy the life. It's safe for them. They enjoy the environment. It's a cultured environment. I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, nowhere is perfect, but definitely I think compared to what they are used to, it's quite an eye-opener.
And yeah, my last question then, András, is just since you've explained what your organization does and what it wants to do, if there are people in the audience that want to support or help your organization or contribute to achieving these aims of yours, are there any ways that they can help, and how can they help?
Yeah, I think we're always open to being approached. I know most people will say, "Oh, it's always about the money." Money is just one thing, but people can always lend a hand. For example, if there are these cultural exchange programs, for example. Young people always need a place to go and stay, and in that sense, I would say if you're not a member of the Solidarity Movement, whether it's AfriForum or Solidarity or Help and Out or one of the many institutions, join up, pay your membership. It's for a really good cause. They do an amazing job, and team up and help us with these initiatives. And then you can also be part of these programs. While my compatriots in Hungary make contact with us. We will also soon need places where young people can be accommodated, for a temporary time period on these exchange programs, and maybe they need transport or somebody to perhaps show them around. We can't do everything ourselves, but at the same time, it gives them a good exposure to that culture. That, in some way, or other, even a good idea, come forward and let us know. The sky's the limit. And I think people must also remember that we are there to try to help in terms of building relations, not only between Hungarians and the Afrikaner, but where we can, from our side, help the Afrikaner in the social, economic development realm in South Africa. You must remember that Hungary is, if I can say, if we've got a superpower, that superpower is technological innovation. If you have to just Google search Hungarian innovations or Hungarian contributions to universal culture, you'll find pages upon pages upon pages of all kinds of inventions. You use a Hungarian invention or some technology every day without noticing it. If you put in 95, it's a Hungarian invention. If you're using a digital computer, it's a Hungarian invention. If you use Word or Excel, it was designed by a Hungarian. Digital programming, the base was actually come up with by a Hungarian, etc., etc., etc. There's a long list. So we believe that we might not be a superpower in terms of army, but in terms of being able to come up with something innovative, and I think that makes that also a special relationship with the Afrikaner, the Boermakeplan. Afrikaners are also very innovative and come up with some amazing ideas, and we believe that together we can help build, better communities, and we both have a common respect for the people around us and the world around us, and let's see what we can do together. It starts with small steps, but we can do a lot together.
I see a sideline opinion says, thank you, András, for extending a hand of friendship to the Afrikaner. Hungarians are such an inspiration to us. We are not family, but we eat the same grass. András, miskien net voor ons afsluit, jy kan ook Afrikaans praat en ek sal graag met jou in die toekoms op my Afrikaanse kanaal ook wil gesels. Miskien moet ons net vir die mense 'n laaste bietjie in Afrikaans net tot sien sê voor ons nou afskakel hierso?
Ja, ek dink my Afrikaans is redelik goed. Danksy al die kommunikasie met die mans en die vroue van die solidariteitsbeweging.
En die studies by Maties.
Ja, ek onthou toe ek by Maties gaan swat, en ek dink dis ook iets wat vir my 'n kwelpunt is, of ek voel sterk oor dat toe ek by Maties gaan swat het, het ek geweet ek gaan swat by Afrikaanse Universiteit. Ek was nie van plan om daar te gaan, gaan amok maak en sê, nee, ek dring aan dat ek moet in Engels my opleiding kry. Ek het geweet, ek het Afrikaans geleer, ek moes dit beter leer, want ek het op skool op tweede vlak gevat, as tweede taal. En ek het graad gekry, en so ek is baie lief vir Maties. So dis waar baie van my Afrikaanse vriende afgekom het. En ek dink, as jy iemand anders taal leer, jy leer baie meer van hulle.
Wel, András, baie dankie vir daai. Jy het my Afrikaanse intekenaars nou heeltemal van hulle stoele af laat val. Hulle het nou nie daai ene verwag nie. But we will definitely have an Afrikaans conversation on my Afrikaans channel somewhere in the future about some of the same.
Can I finish off with a joke, but it actually happened. I think I told you earlier.
Sure, you can finish off with that. Yeah.
With our Prime Minister Viktor Orbán met the Pope recently, and the Pope said to him, Mr. Orbán, do you know that the official language in heaven is Hungarian? And our Prime Minister said, what? Is it really? And he said, yes, it takes an eternity to learn.
And as I said, my colleague Ernst Roots is attempting, so we'll see how far he gets. The audience is asking me to try some Hungarian. I'm not even gonna try, but maybe next time that I visit Hungary, I will learn some basic things like hello, goodbye, thank you, and please. I will make that my mission. But András, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your insights. Thank you that you and your organization are friends of the Afrikaner, and thank you for not only telling us about what your organization does, but also giving some insight into Hungarian culture specifically. As one of my comments also said earlier, there's not a lot of exposure to Hungarian culture or history in general in South Africa. So I think a lot of people in my audience learned quite a bit. Sideline Opinions is super guest. What a mensch. And András, I hope you have an excellent rest of your evening. Like I said, link to your website of your organization is in the description. Also a link to your Facebook. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I would also just like to use this opportunity to thank or just mention Pieter Noudia. He's one of my subscribers and Twitter followers that recognized me today in town. Ek was in die dorp en toe het Pieter vir my kom hallo sê en hy het net vir my gesê hy geniet al my werk en dat hy 'n voorspoed gewens vir die toekoms. So dankie vir daai woorde van ondersteuning ook Pieter. Dit help baie om petrol in my tank en my kollegas by AfriForum se tank ook te sit vir die toekoms as dit kom by motivering vir ons planne uitvoer en 'n plan maak. There my power goes off, so I think that's the signal that now that the conversation is about to end. So András, I hope you have a great rest of your evening, and thank you everyone for your questions and your comments. And if you're new to this channel, you can also subscribe for more of these types of conversations. The Friends of the Afrikaners series will continue. And also, if you're watching and it's no longer live, you can also still take part in the conversation by leaving your comment in the comment section. Totsiens András, lekker week en ons gesels weer binnekort en ek besoek ook definitief weer in die toekoms vir Hongarye.
Awesome. Sien uit.
All right. Cheers everyone. Have a great evening and goodbye and God bless.